Welcome to the Produce Moms Podcast, where we believe there is a produce mom in all of us. I'm Lori Taylor, founder and CEO of the Produce Moms. For 10 years, I sold fresh produce to over 300 grocery stores in the U.S. And today, my team and I are fully focused on inspiring people to eat more fruits and vegetables. This show is just one of the ways that we hope to inspire you and your family to eat more produce and live a better life. If you like what you're hearing on the podcast, join our community of almost 40,000 in all 50 states and over 30 countries by visiting theproducemoms.com/subscribe. And be sure to subscribe and leave us a review on iTunes. Thanks for being here. Enjoy today's show. Hey everybody, welcome back. This is the Produce Moms Podcast, and my name is Lori Taylor. I am the host of this show. I'm the founder of the Produce Moms, and I say it every single week, every single episode. I love this show. The reason I love this show is because of the people. We are so blessed with amazing guests. And today we're welcoming an internet celebrity himself. We have Shay Farm Kid. For those of you that are on TikTok, LinkedIn, and have maybe seen Shay Myers, he is the CEO of Owyhee Produce, and they are growers. All sorts of vegetables, it seems like, Shay, what you share on your social accounts. But one thing that really moved me was a recent, just kind of like so much of what Shay publishes is, this is what's real. This is what's on the farm. This is what's real. And another thing I love about Shay is he does not mince his words. Like if it is something where you're getting it just straight up and real when you're following along with what he does. And we have a labor crisis. There's been an ongoing labor crisis in agriculture as long as I've been involved really with this industry and political action that relates to this industry. Those of you that follow along with TPM, you know I'm not a lobbyist for anything other than child nutrition programming and specifically USDA school meals. But when I'm going onto the Hill and we're talking about critical issues and I'm part of those broader agriculture critical issues teams, labor tends to dominate the conversation. And the way Shay just so vividly can share what's happening on the farm today, right now, things, just all the challenges that growers have been facing. And really, Shay, welcome to the show, by the way. Like, we're glad you're here. I don't need to introduce you.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
Yeah, we got the man here. Let's let him tell the story. But seriously, I fell in love with what you did. It was just a glimpse into reality when we were dealing with the unknown through the COVID-19 disruption. I'm not sure if that's when your video footage actually began. I know that's when I started really following along with what you're doing. But please introduce yourself. Tell folks how long you've been at it with your social accounts as well as your farming business.
You bet. First of all, thanks for having me. I'm really glad to be here and to continue to share kind of the farming centric side of what's happening. I'm a third generation farm kid, which is kind of where the farm kid handle came from. Something that I've always been really proud of, and it took me a long time to realize that what I consider farming to be and what the average person that's not associated with farming thought farming were two different things. And that's really my mission and a lot of my social content is for people to understand that farming isn't a red barn, an old rusty tractor, a chicken coop with a dozen chickens and a couple of milking cows. Right. It's a lot more involved than that. And it's fun and it's cool. It can be exciting. It can be frustrating. It can be scary. And I just like to bring people along with me along that path. And I started, I started with LinkedIn. That was kind of my first place of sharing content. It all started because of an onion tree. Lori, it started because of an onion tree. Did you know there's onion trees?
I guess I didn't. Shay.
You didn't,
I thought
because
they were
because there's no onion trees. But I was sitting with the new produce buyer. Yeah, throw you off, right? I was sitting with the produce buyer and he was trying to understand onion production. And he asked about the onion tree. And I'm like, okay, it's my job to not just educate, the real in-depth stuff about onions, translucent, scale, dry leaf, root basil rot, whatever. Like I was really getting into the weeds, like way out in left or right field. And I wasn't thinking of the basics. And so that onion tree comment was kind of my aha moment. And that happened 6 or 7 years ago, actually. And from then forward, I've been trying to educate both the produce buyer, who may come from a very urban setting, and also more recently with the power of TikTok, the consumer, and the hunger they have, especially in the midst of COVID, and the empty store shelves, the hunger they had, or the desire they had to know where their food was coming from and how it was being produced.
Right. And you've done such a phenomenal job with that. So tell us more about your farming background, and then we'll go a little bit deeper into what you're doing with communications and, social media and connecting with all of these different stakeholders, from, like you said, the corporate sales desk at grocery retail, all the way to households and moms like me. So, but tell us a little bit more about Owyhee Produce.
Yeah, so Owyhee Produce is a sister company to Frohr Farms. Frohr Farms was started by my grandfather in the late 50s. He really didn't start farming on his own until the mid 70s. And the operation, when I got done with college in 2005, was my grandfather, my uncle, and my mom. This farm's on my mom's side of the family. My dad's a banker. We always tell him he was smarter than the rest of us. But the farm is on my mom's side of the family. And so I really didn't know. I was always very proud, like I said, of being a farm kid, something that I thought was cool, but it's not. Okay, confession time. So I am to anyone who is not a farmer, I'm a farmer, Lori, but to anyone who is a farmer, I'm not a farmer. Because I don't spend all of my days in the field. I mean, I'm around the fields, I walk the fields, but as far as our fertility practices or seed varieties or some of the I don't want to call it minutia, but some of the very, minute and small details that have major impacts, I'm like one of the small voices in that process. And that's just the truth. But I talk to everyone as if, I am the farmer, because I grew up that way and I understood it and I've always loved it. But I came back because of legacy. Like my grandfather, there was no one from my generation that was going to return to our family farming operation. Farming was then very difficult. And I thought I wanted to be a pilot. I have my pilot's license. I still fly to this day. I combine that with work as much as I can. I was
going to say, that's actually a pretty good skill for this industry. So
yeah, you can cover a lot of ground and you need to. It was just post 9/11 when I graduated college. Like there was still you weren't going to get a job flying airplanes, not and get paid anything and really be able to do anything for a long time. Right. So I looked, it forced me to look at the farm. But I knew I couldn't come back and be a farmer, because I can't fix things. At least I can't stay happy and fix things. I'm not happy, driving a tractor, but the telling the story, the growth of the business side really intrigued me. And there was really kind of an opening there for me. And my family was willing to, kind of take a gamble on vertically integrating, meaning taking a crop that we already grew and following it along the supply chain further. And that's how I ended up where I am today.
Yeah, it's amazing. And you've really, just speaking from the decade and a half that I've been part of this industry, for sure, Shay, you are a brilliant marketer, a brilliant storyteller, and hands down one of our industry leaders. So congratulations to you and your entire family on this effort. Now, what compelled me, obviously I've been following your work for sure since last year was when I really took notice of what you were doing. And you recently wrote a post on LinkedIn that was the catalyst for us, having this conversation and getting you on the show. So tell us about the asparagus situation. Comes back to my introductory remarks, folks, about labor and how it is affecting what's, the on the farm operation. And when I worked in the supply chain at wholesale distribution, our adage was sell it or smell it. And I think that adage kind of applies, everywhere, every single stage of the supply chain and on the farm is no different. But Shay, please explain to folks the recent situation with asparagus and how you leveraged your communications ecosystem to essentially put together one of the most successful U-pick farms our industry has ever seen.
Yeah, you get lucky every once in a while, but the story behind everything is, I have a great group of followers, and that does help, and their passion behind farming obviously helps spread the word. I mean, all of that matters. But the way that it all started, I guess the background is that we use a significant number of H-2A workers. That's an agricultural guest worker program that allows workers to come to the United States to work for up to 9 months at a time. It's a very bureaucratically challenging program, but the workforce that can come are very, very, very good people, dedicated to the work, very skilled in their ability to do whatever task they're assigned to, and we generally bring the same folks back year in and year out. What happened this year is, because of a typo, basically, in our application, there were some delays, and delays are normally expected. Usually we plan on having or plan what's called the date of need about 30 days early. But because of everything moving and happening at the border, currently we ended up being made aware of those problems, those clerical errors, about 5 days after our date of need. And so it was much too late for us to do anything. We just kept working through. In fact, we got approved on Tuesday of last week. So about beginning of May then. The beginning of May, when our date of need was March 21st, for perspective. Okay. Asparagus harvest starts somewhere between the 1st of April and the middle of April. So we ended up not having those workers to start our asparagus. We use a combination of H2A workers. The crop's already in the ground. Already in the ground. Like it's not like you can reverse engineer the production here. Exactly. And that's the frustration with the system, and the disconnect between someone at a desk and those of us on the ground. Like, hey, it's okay. We're going to make mistakes. They're going to make mistakes. There's going to be delays, but a 60-day delay is just, it's not manageable. You can't manage that. We're bringing these folks to help us do the work because we need them. I mean, in fact, the cost of bringing an H2A worker is probably 30 to 40% more than using a domestic workforce, if they're even available. And that ended up being the case. We had enough to do some of our picking. One of our entire fields, about 35 acres, there were not enough domestic workforce, even as we called around and even tried to pull from California, Washington, and Idaho, and as far away as Texas to get people in to help us pick that field. We could find no one. And what we ended up doing about a week into not being able to harvest that field. So asparagus, let me explain that really quick. Asparagus is a perennial crop. It's planted. You first start harvesting it every single day or at full scale, 5 years into its production life. And when it's time for harvest, mid-April, we'll harvest every single day, 7 days a week for 12 to 14 weeks straight. Wow. In the same field. And you mentioned all these other states, Shay. Where is your asparagus operation? What state? We farm in Oregon and Idaho, right on the border between the two states in what we call the Treasure Valley. Okay, great. So we couldn't come up with the workers. My initial video, kind of a rant on TikTok, actually was talking about how we were going to have 350,000 pounds up to of a wasted asparagus. Sure. And as we looked at that, we're like, okay, well, what can we do? Can we do a U-pick and charge 50 cents or $1 a pound? Or should we just give it away to the public? Or should we just bring the tractors in and till it into the ground? Ultimately, we made the decision, and the food safety side of this, remind me to talk to you about that, but the food safety side of this is critical to why there's more food waste in this country than what there should be. But we decided to invite folks to come in. That was just kind of a call out on my TikTok. I didn't push it to any of our other channels because I didn't want to have too big a numbers come. But all the local media channels picked it up. It was all over. I think it had, just on Facebook alone, on the post that I saw that I was attached to, had like 12,000 shares. And we ended up that Saturday with just over 6,100 people who showed up to the field to pick free asparagus, so that it didn't all go to waste.
And also help people understand how far folks came to do this.
Oh yeah.
Because that was another fact that you shared. And I was like, oh my goodness.
Yeah. So Boise is about an hour away, but we had lots of people. The furthest person came from about 9.5 hours away, from Astoria, Oregon. And then there were lots from 3 or 4 hours away. I mean, we thought when we started, we'd have 500 or 600, and that was going to be a lot to handle, which is why we didn't further promote it. And then once it started rolling, there was no stopping it. So we just had to prepare as best we could on our end to receive as many people as we could, but we never expected 6,000. We thought maybe 1,000 or 1,500, but
right. I mean, it went from your video rant to all this, immediate support. Like, how can we get involved? What can we do? You guys came up with a solution. And then the next thing I knew, you were essentially doing like these sign up genius type things. Like, people had to actually sign up to come because the crowds were getting so big. So tell folks a little bit more about, what the process looked like when the people came in. Like, how do you do this pop-up you pick farm at this scale?
Yeah. And it comes back to the food safety part there. That was the most challenging part of the whole thing, because people don't realize all that we go through to try and follow the protocol from FSMA, the Food Safety Modernization Act, and just to make sure that the food is safe. So I put up an electronic sign-in through Calendly that people could sign up on that. That had all of our food safety documents. It had a YouTube video that did a quick walkthrough of how to appropriately pick asparagus that you're required to watch before you came to the field. And then we had a secondary set of paperwork to sign up for those that hadn't signed up digitally. And then we just set up a queue and would allow people to come in and then pair up with one of our team members that could teach them again how to appropriately cut the asparagus, what lengths, how not to walk on the asparagus plants. And also we did a double check for, earrings, necklaces,
right.
wedding bands.
And this is all food safety protocol.
Yes, exactly.
Because whenever I go into, you can't wear that stuff in the fields or in a processing facility. So you implemented all of that.
Yeah. And we had to implement all of that, not on the fly, but within 24 hours. And there was a lot, the one thing that I was very particular about. I'm like, if people are going to come to the field, they are going to enter the field and work under the same conditions that we're required to do this every day, because this is a teaching moment. This isn't just about free asparagus. This is a teaching moment. Like, every time our people come to go in the field, they have to take all their rings off. They have to take their watch off. They have to make sure they got a hat on their head or a hairnet on their head. They've got to, all of those little things that I think in general, most people don't consider. And I wanted them to have to consider that extra effort that's made to make sure that their food's safe every single day.
I think and not only safe, but the price point at which food is sold in our country, when you experience the on-the-farm operation, or really any operational stage of the supply chain, I continue to be amazed at the affordable price of food that we are able to offer our end consumers in this industry.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're 7 cents of every dollar back to the farm. Yeah, it's
not enough.
We're working on some pretty skinny
absolutely,
margins.
Yeah. Absolutely not enough, but it's a complicated effort to get more money back to the farmer, which is who they deserve greater returns. That is, Shay, that's a whole nother podcast series in and of itself, where we could talk. Yeah. It's more than one episode. That would be a multi-episode series, but so I want to stay focused on what you recently did. How did people respond? Like, what they had to be blown away at, how hard it was, the organization. But please just share more on what all of the attendees, what were their takeaways other than the free asparagus?
Yeah. There were a lot of thank yous and a lot of, folks who showed their gratitude. There were also, a lot of people, lots of lots of comments about, I will never complain about how expensive asparagus is ever again. So that kind of goes to your point. Like, we have to show what we go through and the effort that we take if we're ever going to be able to ask more from the consumer. If you think it's all being done with a robot or it's a really simple process, then you don't recognize why there's a need for more money back.
Very
to the farm
little
sometimes.
in the produce department. Very little is actually done by anything mechanized. I mean, there might be some mechanized plantings, but in terms of the harvesting, almost all of it is hand harvested in the produce department.
Exactly.
Oh, yeah. Well, it's been so insightful and inspiring watching your journey, Shay, and how you're taking what you have access to every day, what's been part of your family culture for, you said 7 generations. Is that right?
3 generations. I'm generation 3. My farming family, I can follow down now on my grandmother's side as far back as we can go. I mean, but our operation is 3 generations in.
Okay, great. So that is, I mean, it's unbelievable to see how you've been able to connect the dots with all these different, everything that's just normal in your life and turning it into compelling content and inspiration for everyone out there, all of the consumers. And really, you've even been a catalyst for our industry to start, really telling the story in a way and being transparent in a way we never really have been before. So many positive things that have happened from this. And I'm glad to hear that one of the primary takeaways from your You Pick event with the asparagus was, I'll never complain about the price again, because I wholeheartedly believe we've got to figure out how to get a greater return to the growers. I wish there was just a quick solution, but I'm afraid there's not going to be one. So let's talk about some of the other issues. I mean, we've obviously talked about some of the issues that are threatening farmers day in and day out, or challenging farmers day in and day out. We've talked about labor. I mean, certainly any other expertise or insights you'd like to share on that. We're talking a little bit about the returns, but how are these labor shortages creating just an ongoing struggle? Are you ever going to get ahead is my question. Like, what is the end game with this?
Yeah, I mean, I think the important thing for the American consumer to think of, and we're certainly dealing with it as producers, is the ability that we have or the lack of ability that we have to reduce costs. Our labor cost has increased 40% over the last 5 years.
What percent did you just say?
40% in 5 years.
Wow. That's unbelievable.
And it's critical to what's happening. That's why you've seen 60, I'm going to use California as an example, but California used to produce 60, and I'm talking within the last 15 years, within the last decade and a half, there were, I'll use the lower number, 40,000 acres of asparagus that was produced in California. That number as of this year, do you have a guess?
0?
600.
Yeah.
600 acres. So essentially zero.
Yeah.
Essentially zero.
Right. I mean, all I have seen, that started with the drought, right? When that kind of like them not having access to the, okay. But labor, did it come back to labor primarily? It's really labor. Not only availability of labor, because it's not, all of this isn't just a function of availability. It's also the cost of labor. And when we can so easily move production to our southern border and pay 10 times less, that's where production continues to go. And that's where the consumer needs to understand the ramifications of their decisions, because we on our farm we would love to continue to grow asparagus as an example. But Mexico is getting better and better and better at producing in that window. And we simply cannot compete with 50-cent minimum wage versus, in Oregon, $16.44 minimum wage. And California is dealing with those similar numbers plus overtime. Like it's an impossibility for us to compete. And so our more and more vegetable production will continue to go south unless the consumer, much like they've done with,
the rainforest friendly. I'm trying to think of the brand that's on some of the stuff for coffee, as an example.
Yeah, no, you're right. It's rainforest and fair trade and, all of those different certifications.
Yeah. And that's really what this comes down to. So I don't know what the label is. And this is a lacking within our industry. I think we should be talking about worker conditions and worker pay rates in this country.
So
versus
like Equitable Food Initiative or Fair Trade. We have several episodes in our archives that spotlight some of these certification programs that are offered at a global scale, and most definitely there's an interest to move all labor workforce to this type of a certification. Shay, as you're explaining all of this, I am reminded of something that I think kind of, I've been privileged to learn this in my years working in the industry, and seeing the business side, but also the political action side of agriculture. And I think that for the first time in my lifetime, I think our industry consumers had an understanding of this concept at the earliest days of the pandemic. And that is food security is national security. And I do think that as you're talking, I'm like, the last thing we want is to as a consumer, create a consumer climate that threatens our domestic farming operation and economy.
Mm-hmm. And that's exactly where we're going. When it comes to vegetable production, asparagus. I mean, the Salinas Valley is kind of one of the last, holdouts, and that's because of the phenomenal production environment, that climate that they're in there. But they're still, their days are numbered as well, unless we start looking at solutions. And I mean, those solutions are not complicated ones, but they're politically complicated ones. And you are absolutely right. Like, do we want to rely on another country or other countries for our food production? And if we don't, it's going to cost the consumer more. That's something that we have to admit to ourselves. There's no way we can do this less expensive than what they can in these other cheaper countries for production. But from an environmental standpoint, from a food safety standpoint, and from a food security standpoint, we certainly can do better.
And also human ethics, right? Like, absolutely. I mean, there's we talk about the human capital involved here. The folks doing this job, they deserve good fair wages. Like and no one domestically is arguing that I've encountered. So it's it is something that you're right. It's not that complicated, but in the world of politics and all the different angles that you would have to approach a solution, it is actually a pretty complicated thing. But awareness is where it all begins, Shay, and you've done a great job laying that foundation for specialty crop agriculture in the United States through your efforts. I mean, it's been phenomenal to watch and be on the receiving end of what you do too. I've learned a lot from you. So, thank you again.
Yeah, thank you.
So, I mean, what's next? I mean, what do you want the people who are with us today on this episode to know? What kind of action should folks take? I can tell you at the Produce Moms, we've since day one have promoted locally grown as USA grown. So we are big advocates for doing all that we can here to empower our domestic farming economy and all of the growers. But what do you want folks to know? Like, where do we go from here? What can consumers expect?
So as a consumer in the grocery store, if you can just ask the produce department to carry produce of the United States, that's the easiest, most straightforward, immediate action that's going to cause change. And I hope that you can do that and that you see a result as you talk to that produce manager. They really want to give you what you ask for, and enough people ask for it, they're going to make that change. The other thing I would like to invite everyone to do is come follow along with me. I'm on LinkedIn at Shay Myers. If you're more of a TikTok or Instagram person, in both of those locations, I'm Shay Farm Kid. And I just would love to be able to share the process and the work and the passion that we have, and maybe, having the ability to share that with your friends will also give them a better understanding of where their food comes from, and therefore help them to also vote with their dollar.
Fantastic. Shay, I can't thank you enough for all that you have done for us. And with that, you always get the final remarks. And I'm so blown away with what you've accomplished. And something I should have mentioned in the intro, Shay was actually recognized. He's our reigning produce marketer of the year in the produce industry. So it's been a true joy watching how your platform and your communications have just been so well received by the general public and our industry as well. You are doing great things. We look forward to continuing following along with what you did at the Produce Moms. We welcome future collaboration. And Shay, with that, you get the final goodbye today, but oh my goodness, what a joy it's been to have you on. Thank you so much for taking some time to share your story with our listeners.
Yeah, well, thanks for boosting me up and making my ego feel good. I mean, I appreciate that. That always is a nice thing to hear. I really do. I love the passion in this industry and on every level of the industry. People, it's our food. It's what every single person eats at least 3 times a day as part of their life. And we get to be a part of that. And that's something really special. And I think that's part of what makes the industry so special, is that connection that we have to people on such a basic carnal, level. I just want to say thank you again for having me on. And I hope that we can continue to gain momentum and share our stories across all aspects of the industry.
Thanks for joining us on this episode of the Produce Moms podcast. If you or someone you know would like to be a featured guest, just send an email to Lori@theproducemoms.com. We know there is a produce mom in you because there's a produce mom in all of us. Join our community on Facebook and all social platforms. Help us change the way America eats. Thanks again for listening, and we'll see you next time.